Thank you for joining us today. I would like to welcome you to the second webinar in our Get Personalized Learning Right series. At the Center for Collaborative Education, we believe personalized learning is the key to closing achievement gaps, building a student population ready for the 21st century, and that academic success and educational equity are what we should expect for all children. Throughout this series, we will focus on each of our 5 principles of personalized learning. Our first webinar looked at dispositions for learning, and in the coming months, we will address authentic, competency-based, and flexible learning. Today, we are drawing our attention to the principle of student-driven learning. We have 2 guests who will help us in looking at how powerful the learning process becomes when students become partners and are empowered to take ownership of their own learning. As questions arise, please add them to the question box. We will have a Q&A later in the session. You will also find resources in the handout box. Our Essential Personalized Learning team hopes today's session gives you valuable insight that you can take back to your classrooms and schools to support your efforts in designing a personalized learning program that ensures equity and excellence. My name is Dawn Shira Corrin, a Senior Associate with Personalized Learning here at CCE. I have worked in education for over 20 years, in education management as a coach and trainer, as a high school counselor with the MESCO program, at the college level, as well as in student programming. My work has always had a focus on addressing the needs of students who are, as our systems often call, at risk, and for whom I prefer to say have been marginalized. Changing the educational narrative for Black and Latino students, decreasing the disproportionate numbers of students of color not achieving at higher rates, developing equity-minded practice, and addressing family engagement with a lens of linking engagement to learning are some of my areas of interest and expertise. I'm especially excited to have Talik Tillman joining us as a guest student and young professional today. Talik is a senior at the Met High School in Providence, Rhode Island, where he is driven by curiosity and his passion for learning. Talik is an actor, photographer, educator, and activist who strongly believes that empathy is his most powerful tool. He is currently an intern at Trinity Repertory Company's Education Department, student facilitator and co-founder of Diversity Talks, and communications manager at SEP Journal. Talik has been featured in various publications highlighting how powerful it has been for him being the student driver in his learning. Also joining us from the Met in Providence is Nancy Diaz-Bain. Nancy is the co-director of the Metropolitan Regional Career and Technical Center, an innovative high school based on personalized learning which has models around the world. She has worked as an advisor and principal. Nancy was born and raised in Rhode Island. Her passion is to make sure students and staff are given every opportunity to excel. Our goals as we look at student-driven learning today are to explore how students are empowered when they actively participate in their own learning. We will do this by looking at our key indicators. I will share some information on student choice and student profiles. And then I will turn it over to our guests to help us paint the picture from their real-life experiences of personalized and student-driven learning. The essential question to keep in mind today is how does student-driven learning allow students to take ownership of their own learning experiences? We have defined student-driven learning as demonstrated by students exercising voice and choice in their learning and co-creating academic profiles and personal learning plans focused on their interests, aspirations, and learning challenges. Bray and McClaskey, 2 leading practitioners in the field, describe student-driven learning as students designing their own learning experiences based on interests, passion, and talent. And as students who can self-direct how they access information, engage with the content, and express what they know based on learning goals. In the handout box, you will see the step-by-step guide by Bray and McClaskey. In this guide, they share their 3-step model of how students evolve as experts in the student-driven process. Starting at teacher-driven with student voice and choice, moving to learner-centered co-designing with the teacher, and finally, students becoming the driver in their learning with the teacher as the partner. It's important to recognize these ideas will be new for some students, requiring us, the teachers, to guide students towards understanding their role as the leader in directing their learning. CCE has identified 5 indicators for success with this principle. I will share insight about personal learning profiles as well as student choice. I will then invite our guest on, and Talik will bring to life for all of us as he shares some of his personal journey, looking at student choice, sharing his learning plan, and his story. Nancy will shed some light on the operational elements of the personalized learning and student-driven model. Let's consider why is student-driven learning important by looking at this quote. Every child has a different learning style and a different pace. Each child is unique, not only capable of learning, but capable of succeeding. There is a message here that every student comes to the classroom with unique experiences and ways of looking at the world, reinforcing one of the driving forces behind personalized learning, the idea that one-size-fits-all education does not work. Another message in this quote is to consider our own beliefs about student capabilities. In her book, Using Equity Audits in the Classroom, Mackenzie points to some telling comments she has heard across the country from teachers who are saying, they're too poor, their parents don't care, and they don't have enough books in their home. This kind of thinking is a sign that we have already decided new initiatives and changes in practice will not make a difference. We must choose instead to listen to the voices of the students who we are not serving well. The students who are saying, counselors underestimate my potential. I wasn't encouraged to take higher level classes or didn't even know that they were offered, or that my concerns are often dismissed. We must choose to listen to these students, like Mian is saying in this quote, because they are capable of achieving, and by honoring their uniqueness, we will see their capabilities. Student-driven learning is important because it welcomes in student voice and choice and pushes us to create personalized learning plans for success. I would like to remind you that as we take a closer look at the indicators, please continue to enter any questions that you have in the question box. Student choice is inviting a student to bring his or her interest and passion into the learning experience. We want to ask the questions of, what do you want to learn? What do you want to read? What matters to you? We can crosswalk the answers to these questions with our curriculum, outcomes, and create our lessons. Getting students directly involved with their learning by making it applicable to real-life situations as we formulate our instructional methods is a key way of bringing in student choice. Student choice is so much more than just the what students learn. Student choice is also the when, the where, and the how. The when of student choice has to do with letting students learn at their own pace. All students do not have to accomplish the same goals at the same time in a personalized learning environment. Like we will hear about in the message about MET students and having real-life learning experiences outside of the school building with their internships and externships. And these opportunities can be designed to connect to student outcomes and build skills to support growth towards mastering the standards that they need to master. Learning spaces that allow students to sit or stand at a desk, to work in groups or alone, to sit on a pillow or in a hallway, all give students choice on where they learn, where they can feel comfortable and hopefully to learn where they can be most productive. Giving students the option to decide where they want to learn can also improve their social emotional learning and increase engagement. The how of students learning brings us to the process that goes along with the content. The processes are the strategies and approaches that we use to engage students. In some of the resources that I have shared, you will see opportunities for looking at strategies and strategies that can be applied to some of the how in addressing student-driven learning. And we will refer to those further along in our session today. The development of the academic profile and creating the space for student choice is necessary for the development of a quality personalized learning plan. Student academic profiles should give us in-depth details about how and who the students are in front of us, and it becomes a guiding source of information telling us about student learning styles, strengths, interests, and areas for growth. It tells us about their accomplishments, the challenges, and even their work ethic. In many situations, students haven't been asked to reflect on these ideas and these items. And oftentimes, students are unaware of these aspects about themselves. The process of developing a student profile can involve guiding students to develop a broader and more independent perspective about themselves and guide them to be ready to bring their whole selves to the student-centered learning process. Students who already know themselves pretty well or are able to lead the development of their learning profile are ready to be engaged and ready to have a personalized learning plan that will drive and inform their learning experience. In creating the profile and engaging the student's voice, we are on the path to developing meaningful relationships with students. Everyone wants someone to listen to what is important to them. And as we show we care and we invest time to get to know students, they will begin to invest in what it is that we have to offer them. Putting together the profile can be done using inventory tools, surveys, group and individual interviews, as well as teacher observations. Students, as well as their families, can be instrumental in developing student learning profiles. At this time, I would like to invite Talik Tillman to join us in the conversation. Hello, Talik, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. Welcome. We look forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Talik Tillman, and I'm extremely appreciative to go to the Met High School because of the learning experience that I've been able to embark on. If you don't mind moving, we're going to move to the next slide, and you'll see here that what's written is one student at a time. This is one of my school's models that's guided me throughout my 4 years as I'm now a senior. During my education, my school really makes an effort to put students at the center of their learning. And they say that we take one student at a time. So throughout my experience, a lot of what my education has consisted of is introspection and reflecting through discussion with my own teacher. So I have an advisor who I sit with. We stay with our advisor for all 4 years in an advisory of 16 students. And we spend time with him kind of figuring out what passions we're interested in, what things we might want to pursue, what opportunities we might want to pursue, and they encourage us to pursue as many opportunities as possible. And this kind of just, seeds and drives and fosters that exploration and that engagement in our learning to make sure that what we're doing is really what we want to do, if that makes sense. I started off my own academic career wanting to be an actor. So going into school, I knew that I want to be an actor, and I created my learning plan based off of wanting to act. So I had a lot of discussions with my advisor about how I can fit being an actor into my own educational journey. And that required things such as researching the history of acting in the Stanislavski system as a freshman. That required learning how to do things like build a resume, like how to develop headshots and how to get professional headshots and things of that sort. My passion has changed a bit throughout my academic journey. But in order to reach my goals, we're going to move to the next slide. In order to reach my goals, I've had to create learning goals in all of the projects that I've created. We engage in project-based learning. So I didn't create the learning goals, but my school thankfully created the learning goals for me. And I basically look for learning goals in all of my projects. Some of the learning goals include communication, quantitative reasoning, which includes things like math, and social reasoning, which includes things such as history or social studies. And basically, whenever we develop a project, we sit down, and because it's driven by our interests, we already are engaged and invested in the learning, but we make sure that it reaches these academic goals so that, we're still promoting and reaching relevance, rigor, and academic success while pursuing our interests. So, just for an example of this, of a project that would reach learning goals while still being interesting to me, is as a junior, I was able to do dramaturgical work for a show called Appropriate at Trinity Repertory Company. Um, and as a dramaturg, I had to do research on the context of the play in order to inform the actors. So I was doing historical research specifically on the history of lynchings because the play dealt with lynchings and with dealing about African American history from a white perspective. So I worked with a PhD student at Brown on my project in order to basically do this research and facilitate conversations with actors. And then that led to paid opportunities to facilitate conversations with community members. So in this project, because I was doing historical research, I was able to kind of derive the goal of communication because I was interacting with other people, I was expressing and articulating my ideas, and also social reasoning because I was doing using that learning goal and those skills. In order to shape our learning and kind of guide it, we're going to move to the next slide. We use something called the learning plan, and this is just a glimpse of what my learning plan looked like for my first trimester. So the real world learning LTI, you can see there, I forgot to mention, but as a part of our learning experience, we also take part in an internship 2 days out of the whole school week. So we're at our internship for about 12 hours a week. My internship is Trinity Repertory Company. I'm with the education department. So all of that information is listed. So this learning plan kind of helps us structure and guide our learning during that discussion that we have with our advisors. So what I do is I go in and write things under workplace knowledge and skills objectives. So I write different objectives that I have for my internship. And then on the right hand side, you can see I write the final products and outcomes. And I do this for every single aspect of my learning. So not only my LTI, or my learning through internship is what that abbreviation stands for, but not only for my internship, but for the way that I supplement science, because I do need science. The way that I supplement math through or quantitative reasoning, through any other workshops or any other classes or opportunities that I may be taking, that I may have taken advantage of. And we kind of have a better idea of what opportunities we take advantage of when we go through this process called Gateway in our sophomore year. And that kind of just involves looking at what we call our post-met option. And our post-met option is just what we plan to do after high school or after the Met. And for me, that was college. I wanted to go to a four-year university. So I look at what the requirements are for those universities and for those opportunities beyond high school and plan my learning and craft my learning plan to supplement those requirements that I need while also kind of fueling and driving my interests. So, for example, I took a science class at the Community College of Rhode Island, a biology class, because I knew that I needed 3 years of science in order to go to a four-year university. And that's kind of how our whole plan and how our journey and experience is crafted. Next slide, please. And this is something that I really want to share is my learning transcends the walls of any classroom. This is something that they really, really promote in my advisory and on the campus, is that as students, every single opportunity that we take advantage of is school. So although I do a program on the weekend at RISD, that's counted as school credit and added to my transcript as well as my learning plan. Every Me being in shows after school hours, after traditional school hours, still is a part of my learning and a part of my academic journey. So therefore, it's written on my learning plan and it's given as credit in different ways through our school. It does have to be documented. So we document our work through writing reflections, or we call them LTI logs or learning through internship logs. So we'll just write kind of a couple of paragraphs based on standards that our advisor gives us. But they really, really, really let us know that everything that we're doing is a part of who we are as a student and is a part of our learning. And next, the last note that I wanted to leave in the last thing that I think was the most important about my academic experience at the Met is that you only truly begin to learn the moment you feel uncomfortable. It looks like there's a typo there. I apologize for that. But this is really, really, this resonates with me because this system and this way of learning is not traditional in any way, shape, or form. And it did take time to adjust to this way of learning. But I've come to learn as now a senior that feeling uncomfortable is learning. That moment of uncomfortability and then asking yourself a question and doing introspection is how you learn. That's how we've kind of been conditioned to learn, is asking ourselves questions and driving our projects through inquiry and exploration. So that's kind of shaped how I think now as a student and as a human being, is questioning existing systems and working towards solutions from there. It's a very different way of learning. I'm very fortunate for all of the opportunities that I've given and in the support system also that my advisor and administration has played in my life, because they look at us as a whole student and take in account our personal lives, our interests, our, they deal with our sometimes attitudes we might have, and they're very, very, they show a lot of tenacity in making sure that they're doing everything to cater to our needs and give us the best possible academic journey and academic experience they can. Um, so yeah, thank you. I think I'm gonna pass it off
So,
to.
okay, Talik, I'm going to say that one more time so that our whole audience can hear us. I want to thank you for sharing all of the information that you just shared and giving us some insight into your experience at the Met. We have a couple of questions that are coming in that are actually directed to you in regards to what you've just shared, and I'd like to pose those questions to you at this time, if that's okay, so that we can respond to them.
Of course.
Very good. So Melissa would like to know if the Met has theater courses or a theater program, and how the arrangements have worked for you to be able to participate in the theater that you mentioned.
Mhm.
Could you speak to a little bit about that?
Yeah, so being interested in theater, it was difficult at first to secure an internship because it would be difficult to follow an actor. So I was housed in the education department at Trinity Rep for the past 3 years. That's where my internship has been. And my mentor there at my internship site has been very, very active and proactive about finding me different acting opportunities. So by getting I get my theater experience through word of mouth, through my mentor, and by her guiding me through that process. But my work at the theater at Trinity Rep is actually a bit different. I do arts integration during the day, so I'm more of an educator during the day, and then at night when I do shows and when I'm in rehearsal, I I get that real world experience of being an actor and being and taking part in theater.
Very good. So your involvement with the theater is part of your internship that you have coordinated along with your advisor to earn some of your credits and meet some of the standards at the Met. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And are there any theater courses at the Met specifically?
So we have an extended day program that's actually an amazing program. So as a freshman, you're required to stay an extra, I think, 2 hours. Your school day is from 9 to 5 o'clock p.m. instead of from 9 to 3 o'clock p.m. And you have to sign up for an activity, an extended day activity. So as a freshman, what I did was I did theater. So we went to a building off campus, and there was a teacher who taught us some theater. We read The Crucible. We learned about like monologues and things of that sort. So that helped kind of supplement that as a freshman.
Very good. So I would like to ask one more question before we move on, and perhaps we'll have some more at the end. I wanted to go back to your point around being uncomfortable, what you shared on your last slide there, the slide that we're still looking at, in your perspective on the idea that being uncomfortable means that you're actually learning. And you talked some about the introspective process that you are encouraged to take on at the Met. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about situations where you take that inquiry approach now, maybe some other learning experiences
Yeah,
where you can feel like you have this different approach and this lens that you operate from where you're really taking an inquiry approach and dealing with different things.
yeah. So I realized that there is a lot to cover, and I also missed some points in talking about just the way that our system works at school and also just my experiences. But I would definitely want to bring up my where I am in my internship experience now. Like I said, I started off as acting. I still do productions, but working with the education department, I actually got into arts integration. So for the past 2.5 years, I've been teaching first to third grade students. We work with ESL and bilingual classrooms to kinesthetically engage students in text. So you find that with um, with students who don't necessarily have developed English skills, by acting out different kind of texts, they really get engaged in the story. And one experience that I want to share is we were reading a book, and it was called like Ordinary Mary, about how one good deed leads to another. And I think that this is a moment where I've really kind of used that inquiry and just, thought a little bit about something that was read. My mentor read the book, and it said, "Oh, what beautiful blue eyes you have." And I looked around the room, and I realized none of the students had blue eyes. So, using this kind of reflection and just feeling uncomfortable in that moment for myself too, I brought it up to my mentor, and I was like, "Natalie, none of these students have blue eyes." And I told her she even didn't have blue eyes. So this kind of started at my internship. I've been leading culturally responsive work and finding culturally responsive texts for the students. And just it brought a new discussion up in developing the curriculums that we also bring to our students. I also have been fortunate enough to take part in an event called Startup Weekend Education, and just having this new perspective on what education means and how it could transcend the classrooms and how we don't have discussion in the classrooms with our teachers. And I say we as in the traditional student. I've seen the effects of having discussion in the classroom and having discussion about identity specifically, and how that's so great for my educational experience. So I took part in Startup Weekend Education and was able to co-found a business called Diversity Talks. And Diversity Talks, it's student-led professional development grounded in the cultural competencies of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So students are leading the conversation on topics that are pertinent in their schools and that are specific to their schools. Um, and I've been able to actually go to Kansas City. I'm going to be going to California in May, but I've led workshops with adults and with educators on implicit bias, on power and privilege, and it's all really promoting educators to also understand that they can feel uncomfortable and that that's a learning moment in order to acknowledge and invite students' identities and discussion in the classroom.
Very good. Thank you.
Um,
I could ask a few more questions now. You've shared so much
yeah.
great information. We will hold questions for now and come back to those in a little bit. And I would like to invite Nancy to join us at this time. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. So I'd love for you to join us and help our audience to put together some of the pieces that Talik has shared about his experience at the Met and all of the wonderful things that he's been able to do as a part of your school and learning environment.
So one, I just want to thank you for having me on. I think that your goals that you spoke of earlier, your organization, Center for Collaboration in Education, like all of those goals are exactly what the Met really transpires to do all the time. And really, I could listen to Talik all day. He's done such amazing work, and he's an example of when you allow a young person to the freedom to choose and decide what they want to do on what could happen. So what the Met believes in is that we start with the belief that every young person, one is a person. We respect all our students in the idea that they have a voice, they have choices, they can communicate what they want to do, and that all young people can learn, and that everyone here is. We start with the belief that every young person at the school can achieve whatever it is that they want to do, and so our job as the educators is to do just that. So whatever it is that the student wants to do, it's the advisors and staff's job here to make it happen, right? And so some of the systems that we have here is that um, we're small, and intentionally we have 6 buildings um, that are small, that you can't make any bigger, so that students can be in a small, safe environment where the classroom sizes are 16 students with one advisor who they have for 4 years. And the role of that advisor, like Talik said, is to allow every student in their class to be the best that they can be and challenge every student to the level that they need to be challenged, and really to slow down for any student that needs more time to slow down. And we believe in, if students are in school, they're not learning. So we try to get them out of school as much as possible, because that's where we feel the learning is happening. And so the internship piece is the key piece for us. This, in the 21st century, and technology changes every day. What's happening in the news is changing every day. And so how do we help educate our kids if we're in a school building and doing, whatever was happening years ago? And so we believe in keeping it fresh, keeping it fun, keeping students engaged. And so we start with, what are they interested in? And once students identify what they're interested in, then we find an outside mentor organization that can really give students the opportunities and the networking so that they can begin to learn. The curriculum is built through that internship site, and so the goal is that we have students, you name it, with veterinarians, with doctors, lawyers, mechanics, manufacturing, artists, the mayor's office, in graphic design, And the idea is really to, once they're in that environment, I mean, I think if each one of you in your own roles, if you think about your daily work, that you're constantly analyzing data, you're constantly working with other people and trying to figure out. There's like social studies, science, and math, and everything we do, and so we try to get our students to be in environments where that is happening and they can do authentic work with mentors who are doing it every day and giving kids real work to do. So everything Talik mentioned, like he was working on this play that Trinity was going to do. He had to educate the actors because that's what they needed to do to get the play done. And so lots of rich history that he learned, lots of rich reading that he learned. And now that the work that he's doing around education and figuring out how to really educate students and what's best, it's psychology, and there's some science behind that, and training teachers and how to best train teachers so that they can really educate students. So everything happens outside of school. Our, folks often ask us, "Oh, do you have a music program? Do you have a theater program?" Because we say, no, we don't have any of it. We find the adults in the community, in the real world, that are doing it. We have a student who's ninth grade this year who's interested in origami, and he makes these wild, huge um, uh, structures of origami. And so who knew that small Rhode Island had an origamist, and he is now interning with that person. And as part of his work, his research, or his thesis is that doing origami relaxes and releases stress in children. And so the origamist that he's working with works in hospitals with children that are sick. And so he's going to continue to do research and work around it, but it's like, is origami and the work that they're doing in the hospital really releasing the stress of these children, right? So lots of science, lots of supporting and changing people. For us, we can't do it without the student, because they're the ones who really communicate the goals and what they want to learn. And then we can't do it without the parent, because the parent knows that child and has lived with that child their whole life, because it can really help us and help us know what their likes and dislikes, and how to push and where not to push their child. And then that mentor is the person who's doing the real work that then gets our kids engaged and excited to learn. So our goal is to get kids out, get them excited, and really get them learning. I can go on forever, so I just want to, maybe that's it, and then we can ask questions.
Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you for sharing all of those different points. I'm wondering if, in thinking about the organizational components of your school and the staffing and the professional development piece that you mentioned, could you talk a little bit about the professional development that happens with your teachers? And I'm thinking specifically about how it links back to the personalized learning plan and the goals that students have to identify with that plan that connects back to their experience. Talik talked about his project being linked to goals of communication and social reasoning, and I was curious if you could help us understand a little bit more about, connecting what they are doing out in the real world back to some of these expectations that we're working towards helping students gain skills.
Yeah. So part of it is, doing this work, takes a lot of training, but it all makes sense, right? It really does make sense. And if you use the professional in the field, and we always work with, we train our advisors is to collaborate and really use that mentor, because they're the ones who really understand the work, and they can easily see the science, easily see the English and the math, right? And so there's a lot of professional development that happens here. The advisor meets with the principal weekly, in one-on-one to really talk about each student and help think of and develop those learning goals and those projects. We have staff meetings that happen weekly where the staff also work together and do training on how to, you know, create a challenging learning plan for students. There's a grade level meetings where each building has 9th through 12th grade level students. So that's a team of people who meet weekly to train and support each other on how to create these plans and challenge students. There's a grade level monthly meeting, so once a month, all the advisors from the same grade level from across our system come together, and they're sharing best practices, and we're collaborating and supporting teachers on just developing these plans. And then we have once a month meetings of professional development where we bring the whole school together, and in whatever area we need to develop, we're working together to strengthen. But the principal is really key, and the other advisors in the building are key because they constantly work together. You know, a new staff person is going to have a veteran staff person go out with them on internship visits. The principal will go out with the person on internship visits. We'll observe advisories, really supporting on how to create a good learning plan and then how to challenge students so that you can get projects like what Talik is working on. So it's really something that's ongoing and extensive, but it happens, and it has to happen all the time because you have to be talking about these things all the time to help challenge students. And so I think that's, you know, Dawn and I talked about like what's one thing that schools can do is, so like, you know, because not everyone's going to be like the Met, but the one thing I think is like the collaboration between teachers and the communication and the sharing, like that's one thing that can happen. And I feel like that's one thing we do very well all the time.
Very good, thank you.
I have about 2 more minutes before I have to go, so I apologize.
That's quite all right. I appreciate the time that you've been on with us and sharing some of those details. We are having a few more questions that are coming in to the question box at this time. It looks like we have one directed to Talik here, where the audience member is curious about the idea of Talik, how you learn to create the learning objectives. I actually was thinking that might be related to something you might share as well, Nancy. But Talik, if you're still there, if you could share with us some of your experience around how you were able to learn how to create the learning objectives for yourself, and were they a part of the advisory process or another part of what happens at the Met?
Mm-hmm. So the learning objective of like social reasoning or communication or quantitative reasoning, those kind of just exist and are part of Met community and Met culture. And as freshmen, we go through a lot of learning about the Met. That's a big part of our experience. So in kind of being a student at the Met as a freshman, you learn about what the different learning goals are and what the different objectives are. You learn about what a learning plan is as you're learning about your content-based work as well. So creating it, we actually are guided. My principal, I actually remember this experience specifically for empirical reasoning, the science learning goal. He came in and he did this activity with us. I think like using some sort of box about how science is in more things than we realize. So he kind of broke it down by doing in a workshop with us and teaching us about the learning goal and how we can find the learning goal in different projects and in different activities and experiences. So that was like,
okay.
We learned about that learning goal, and then from there we learn about the other learning goals, and then for each project we have like a reflection process and a planning process in which we find the learning goals that are in our project. So it takes some like critical thinking skills as well, because it's not the traditional I am learning about the periodic table of elements, so I'm doing science. It is that psychology, that there are things that work in the brain when you're talking about education. So that is empirical reasoning, and making sure that you find those connections and make those connections when you do your thesis or whatever write up you do about the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. So Nancy, it sounds like the learning objectives and goals are a part of the fabric of the MET community, where all students learn about them and recognize that they have to identify ways to build those skills out in their internships. Is that a little bit of how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the professional development that happens for the teachers. And then the teachers then, implement it in the classroom. And then ultimately, the goal is to have those discussions with the mentors to see what are the learning goals that they are doing there that the student can then have on his project.
Okay, very good. So we're having another...
Any direct questions for me? Any direct questions for me before I have to go?
So the one question I do see here is, when you were trained to be a principal at the Met, did you expect it to be the way that it is, or was there something that's different?
Well, interesting enough, I didn't introduce myself formally. I started as a Met as a volunteer first, and then I did my student teaching at the Met School. And then I had my own advisory for 4 years as an advisor, which I had my own students like Talik has an advisor. And then I became a principal, and I am co-director. So I really, in some ways grew up in the Met system. And the facilitation and the organization that it takes to be an advisor is really the skills that taught me, I believe, in order to be a good principal and good co-director, because you have to network and communicate and be super organized, because you're collaborating with students, parents, mentors, family members, and lots of different people to make this educational system for this child work, And so principal work here is very different. They're in the classroom, they're walking around, they have relationship with students, they know every parent. They're going out internships, observing advisors, observing students. It's a really enriched experience here. I do have to go.
Very good. Okay, thank you. That's okay. Thank you for joining us. If we have any additional questions that come up that is directed to you, I'll be in communication with you, and we can think about a way of getting that information out to our audience. So thank you again, Nancy.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Very good. Thank you. I'll talk to you again sometime soon. So at this time, we were moving ahead to our questions. And we had a couple of more questions that we can talk about, Talik, you and I, for our guests who are still joining us. One guest is curious about, what are your plans after high school? I know that you're a senior, and so you must be in the midst of applications and hearing back from schools. Can you tell us a little bit about what you hope to study and what you'll be pursuing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now, I'm really interested in studying political science, Africana studies, and public policy. I really want to make sure that in everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to make a change, and I think that the most pragmatic way to make change is policy. Policy is passing policies and making sure that systems that we exist in are really here to serve us. And when I say us, I mean like all of us. So I want to study political science. I've taken some civic engagement in my own community as well, and Africana studies and maybe even Latinx studies to learn the history, the untold history, the history that traditional schools don't often explore in the classroom. And I'm still definitely interested in education, so public policy, and I will continue art as far as acting or my photography in some form when I'm in college.
That sounds really exciting. You have a very ambitious journey ahead of you. I wonder if you can take us back to some of the ideas that you shared at the Met, and having an appreciation that it's a very unique school environment. I am curious to understand if there was a person or if there were some things maybe that were in place. But what has been the force that has been most instrumental for you in really pushing forward and maximizing all of the opportunities that you can in an environment like the Met?
It definitely is my mom. She actually made the decision for me to go to the Met. I was kind of set on going to the traditional high school in my area just because it felt safer. It was more comfortable, and all my friends were going there. So my mom actually sent me to the Met High School, thankfully. And she has been definitely a great support system in my life as far as just making sure even before going to the Met that I do the best that I can with what we have, and that's just a mindset I feel like she's always had, just making the best out of whatever we had. So she kind of instilled that in me too, and then going to the Met really gave me the resources and tools to kind of capitalize on that and make the most of doing the most with what I had, and really taking advantage of opportunities and working hard in order to get where I want to get. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
So let me ask you, what advice would you have for another young person planning on their high school career? Their next step is entering ninth grade in the coming year, and I'm just curious, what advice would you have for them?
This is something I actually learned from. Our school has an entrepreneurship center too, so I took one of the classes there. You have to apply for it actually, and I took the class called Entrepreneurship 360. And one of the things that they taught us is you to network. They told us really the importance of networking, and it goes back to that taking advantage of as many opportunities as possible, but just especially as a student, how supportive other people will be of your endeavors and how much there is out there that you can take advantage of. So just networking and meeting people, meeting mentors and role models who can kind of help you make decisions and help you get clarity in whatever you're trying to move towards. I think that's definitely always the first step. And then also finding what motivates you and what you want to do and really like making the most of that as well. I think that's what's important. I think that's what's helped me, and it's definitely changed too. So you have to be forgiving with that process. Know that you're not gonna do exactly what you want, and it's gonna be exactly as you planned. Like there's a process, and it's malleable, and that it involves. So I would also say my third like piece of advice was know that it's okay to be uncomfortable. I've learned, like I said, my biggest lessons in moments of uncomfortability and just not feeling certain, but also question that, because sometimes when you're uncomfortable for a right reason too. So it's not always feeling uncomfortable is a fault. It's just really, I guess the message there is making sure that you're really being cognizant of where you're at, and questioning systems that exist.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Talik. Everything that you have shared with us today and your thinking has made an impact on me. I will share. I wish that when I were entering ninth grade, some of the things that you've had available to you were available to me at that time. And
Yeah.
so, again, I can't say enough about how much what you have shared is hopefully valuable and important to all of our teachers and educators and other folks that are joining us on the call today.
Yeah.
We have two more things that we want to cover in the last minute or two for any of you that are still on the call at this time. In your handout box, again, there are a couple of resources, and one of those resources is a document with links to pages where you will find lots of valuable information. There are two resources in particular that have instructional strategies, methods and tools that can really help you in your classrooms with activities that you can do with your students. And the UDL aligned strategies, which is the second link on the document I've shared, has over 100 ideas for supporting your student-centered practice in your classroom. And each of the ideas is written with a very brief and succinct direction on how you can implement it. So I want to encourage everyone to make sure that they take those resources with them today. The second thing that I wanted to offer and share is that I believe we have an evaluation for those of you that have joined us today. And I think I am hearing from my administrative team and my technical support here that unfortunately we cannot send you the link for you to connect to give us some feedback today. We had hoped to get some feedback and hear what your thoughts are on what went well and what you want to learn more about today. And what we will try our best to do along with sharing the recording is to perhaps send a link for any of you that might be interested and willing to give us some feedback. So I just want to mention that we also have that next webinar coming up in March where we will be focusing on authentic learning. Please come back and join us again at that time. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Thank you, Talik, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your story with us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.